How's it going, dudes? Welcome to the worst board game of all time Community Tournament Selection Show, where we will start the contest to determine the worst of the worst, while giving you the opportunity to predict the results and win a piece of vintage board gaming history. Hundreds of board games from around the world are aiming to qualify for the tournament, and are currently glued to their screens waiting to see if they will make it in and have a shot at greatness. The National Board Game Association Selection Committee are making their final decisions now, and should be revealing the final bracket shortly. Until then, I will give a quick rundown of how this works for those just tuning in. What we've got here is a single elimination bracket tournament, where games will compete head-to-head in 1v1 matchups to determine which game is worse. Winners will move on to the next round, with the process continuing until we get to the final and crown our champion. But here's where you come in. In the show's and channel's description, there is a link where you can fill out your own bracket, predicting who will win each matchup all the way up to predicting which game you think will become the champ. Brackets will be scored based on how accurate they are to the real results, and the bracket with the most points at the conclusion of the tournament will be awarded the grand prize of a vintage board game that will be revealed at the end of the show. Brackets are free to enter, so be sure to fill yours out after the show for a shot to win big. Lastly, I'll explain what those numbers were on the bracket for those that are unaware. These are seeds, which are used to rank a game on how well it's projected to do in the tournament. The lower a team's seed, the further they are expected to go. But just like in real life, numbers aren't everything. So don't fill out your bracket with just the lowest seeds moving on, because upsets are bound to happen. And with that, I'm getting word that the picks are in. The 64 teams that will be competing for the title have been finalized. Let's head over to the big bracket to learn who's made it in and who will be left at home. Looking at the Stink region first, let's meet the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, War! This classic 1v1 card matchup will see you attempt to draw a card that's higher than your opponent's, while occasionally getting into the titular War, which will put more cards on the line. The game has plenty of critics, citing the lack of actual player involvement in the game and the fact that it takes an extremely long period of time to play a game this simple. But with any game, War has its defenders, who enjoy the easy-to-understand rules and gameplay, and the fact that when a war happens, it is genuinely a tension-filled experience. It will be matched up with the number 16 seed of this region, Mega Nation. This 80s classic will see players attempt to dominate the world by acquiring the most important nations around the globe while attempting to bankrupt their opponents. This game struggles mainly due to the limited amount of mechanics that the game has for how long it takes to play, as well as suffering from the classic Monopoly endgame syndrome of just going around the board until someone gets unlucky enough to finally lose. However, with the Monopoly negatives come the Monopoly benefits, as the game's initial scramble for countries can be hectic and entertaining, while also enjoying the cards that can often shake up the game state. Up in our next matchup, we will see the number 8 seed, NBC, the TV news game. This title from 1962 offers trivia for players from the time period as they try to move around the board while also being overlooked by famous NBC News anchor Chet Huntley. The game features the same negatives suffered by many trivia titles, being nothing but a roll the dice and answer a questions title, but it separates itself from the other titles in the genre due to its obtusely dull theming as well. But fans of the title will mention the fact that it is a pretty easy to understand title that doesn't take very long, and the age of the questions and the game actually add quite a bit of challenge to those seeking to become the best. It will be going up against the number 9 seed, Fact or Crap. This 2001 trivia title challenges players to determine whether a statement is truly fact or if it is truly crap, while attempting to gather all of the tokens from the middle pile. The game's haters draw ire from the fact that this is really just a true or false quiz with a funny name, and that there are no other mechanics other than you answer a question, then the next question is read off, and then you answer it. Fans of the game, however, love the fast-paced environment of everyone competing to answer the question at the same time, as well as the rush hour cards being able to shake up the gameplay a little bit and add some variety. Our next matchup will feature the number 5 seed, LCR. Also known as Left Center Right, this 1983 title will have you and friends rolling the dice to see who can gather all of the tokens. The game's critics will point to the fact that this description is all you do in the game, and that players can do nothing other than roll the dice, see what happens, and then have the next player roll the dice, and see what happens. But fans of the game enjoy its low complexity and low commitment, making it a great option for parties or gatherings due to its high energy. LCR will be competing against the number 12 seed, The Campaign for North Africa, The Desert War, 1940-43. This fan-favorite title has been declared the most complex war game of all time, and has earned that title vehemently due to the fact that no player has ever managed to finish a full game. The game's detractors mention that this title is over-complex to the point that no one can understand it, overdeveloped to the point that it is a chore to play it, and overloaded to the point where no one has ever finished it. But the game's many fans see it as a one-of-a-kind creation with nothing rivaling it, and the scale being a challenge for those brave enough to take it on. Next in the tournament, we meet the number 4 seed, Pug U. This 2018 title aims to create a fun environment around a group where you try to insult your friends and see which person gets insulted the most. Unfortunately, the game's haters will point out that the game fails to do this correctly and instead just creates a mean-spirited environment, in tandem with the fact that the game features several mechanics that are altogether pointless or don't contribute at all to the gameplay. This title will be up against another canine competitor in the number 13 seed, Doggy Doo. This popular 2010 kids game sees players attempt to collect the poop before their opponents can, and win if they can collect all 3 pieces. The game's critics despise the fact that this theme gets old very fast, as well as featuring little to no gameplay, just rolling the dice and seeing if you get to collect the poo first. But the game's fans really enjoy the theming, as well as showcasing that the simple gameplay is very good for children of all ages to understand. With the top half of the Stink region completed, let's head to the bottom half and meet our number 2 seed, Time Control. This 2003 title sees secret agents attempt to weaponize time against each other, using their combat ability to alter history. The game has been universally praised for its unique theming, unfortunately being equally as panned due to the terribly written rules, absurdly slow game speed, and mind-numbing PvP elements utterly squandering that inventive theme. But the game is not without its fans who enjoy hanging on to the time-based elements as well as using the strategy and preventive thinking required to make the correct moves. It will be going up against the number 15 seed of the Mad Magazine game. This 1979 title sees players attempt to spend all of the money they start the game off with, including a ton of random elements based on the titular magazine. The game's detractors point to these random elements and mention how the novelty of them wears off quick, especially when no matter what you do in the game, a winner will basically be picked at random every time. And on to our next matchup, we have the number 7 seed of Power Lunch. This 1994 title sees you attempt to sit celebrities from the time period at tables, and requires you to mention why this particular combination of people would be sitting together if you cannot get a correct match. The game's detractors mention that the over-reliance of celebrities from the 1994 time period have aged the game horribly, and that it's practically impossible to play with some combinations without looking up who the people are, because they're not famous anymore. However, the game's fans love the cool central mechanic, adding a social element to the rummy formula, as well as it being a great group game as long as you're allowed to look up who the people are. Power Lunch will be competing against the number 10 seed, 15 Love. This 1974 tennis title pits players against each other in a singles or doubles tennis match, and implements the tennis formula of returns, serves, and movements for your players through a dice rolling mechanic. The game's haters focus in on the fact that no matter what strategy you implement, it will always come down to a roll of the dice, as well as drawing particular attention to the fact that playing an entire full tennis match while doing nothing but rolling dice would be absolutely insane. The game's fans praise the game for being an incredibly creative way to implement tennis into a board game, and that the game rewards strategic thinking for where to put your players so that they can get the maximum chance of returning a shot. Meeting our next matchup, we have the number 3 seed of Public Assistance. The 1980 anti-welfare game has garnered tons of controversy due to its theming, even being banned at one point from stores. The game's haters point to the game's elements and theming being downright offensive at times, as well as being woefully unbalanced and relying far too much on luck to be enjoyable. But fans of the game point to the unique theme that isn't available anywhere else, and that the random elements can keep players invested even when they're woefully down. It will be going up against the number 14 seed, Bear Valley. This 2016 Press Your Luck title challenges players to find their way back to a campsite through a randomly generated forest. This design has garnered ire from players due to the strategic moves you make eventually coming down to only luck every time, and with haters particularly pointing out that the character skills somehow make the game worse by making it more complicated. However, fans of the game point to the base game being very well balanced with its risk-reward movement, and that you'll never be playing the same game twice due to the random map setup. And for our last matchup in the Stank region, we have the number 6 seed, the Worst Case Scenario survival game. This 2001 title from the popular book series sees players try to answer trivia questions to make it to the end of the map first. The game's detractors focus in on the fact that the game is violently boring, featuring only 3 total mechanics in the entire game, and also point out that many of the questions are so open-ended in their wording that multiple of the answers can be correct at once. However, fans of the game like to see the fun survival trivia and the quick pace at which the game moves as a good thing that improves the title with high replayability. It will be matched up against the number 11 seed, Sorry. This classic board gaming title sees players attempt to move all of their pieces around the board before their opponents can, impeding their progress along the way by stopping on the same spaces or sending them back to start through the titular Sorry cards. This wildly successful title has drawn plenty of criticism from the game's haters, being the fact that all you do in the game is draw a card and see what happens, and that the game can drag on for ages if players are not able to get the card that they need to move out from their spaces. But due to its widespread success, the game has plenty of defenders as well, as they see the title as having a good amount of strategy in choosing which pieces to move and how to get them into a favorable position, as well as keying in to the unpredictable nature of the game, forcing you to adapt to an ever-changing game state. Let's check in on the Classic Games watch party to see how they feel about Sorry's inclusion. And it looks like they are loving it. Glad to see the games come together and support each other here, even dressing up in the same theme of their classic bookshelf attire. That is a paragon of sportsmanship right there. And that will round it out for the Stink division. Let's take a look at some of the matchups and see if we have any way too early predictions for the outcomes already. I'm getting word that we are already on upset alert between the matchup of LCR and the campaign for North Africa. North Africa has become vehemently popular in the last couple of years, and a lot of those fans are going to want to see the game do well. LCR is going to have an extremely tough first round matchup there. In addition to that, we're seeing a very lopsided prediction in terms of the public assistance versus Bear Valley option. Bear Valley is not that well known among the general gaming circle, so it going up against a titan of controversy like public assistance in the first round is going to be an extremely tough match for it to overcome. Other than that, we should have a very good first round on our hands for the Stink region. But don't leave just yet. 48 more games have yet to be revealed for the tournament, and titles from across the world are still waiting in anticipation to hear their name called for the tournament. The next region will be revealed when we come back. Welcome back! Last we left off, we had just finished the Stink region, so let's move over to the other side of the bracket and take a look at those teams playing in the Stank region. To start the region off, we have the number 1 seed, One-Upmanship, Mine's Bigger. This 2013 title pits players against one another in a bid to be the first one to earn $100,000 through property acquisition, stock trading, and other money-making ventures. The game is universally panned due to being poorly designed from both a gameplay and visual perspective, being incredibly tough to keep track of all the moving parts, and having one of the worst board game mechanics of all time, the loser's reset. But every game will have its own fanbase, and fans of this game enjoy that the game is so unfair that it actually rebalances itself. The stock market mechanic is an interesting new gameplay feature, and it often shakes up the gameplay with some physical challenges. This absolute beast will be going up against the 16 seed of this region, Angry Birds Knock on Wood. This 2011 title sees players build up structures for the pigs to inhabit, only to then take the iconic birds and try to knock down those structures for points. The game's haters say that it relies too heavily on its gimmick and offers little else in terms of gameplay, as well as mentioning that building the towers after each round can become tedious over a long gameplay period. But fans of the game say that it translates the Angry Birds 2D action into the 3D space really well, and is also very fun to use the catapult to try to knock down the towers. Our next matchup will see the introduction of the number 8 seed, Oy Vey! This 1979 title sees players roleplay as a Jewish mother, as you attempt to get both of your sons to become doctors and both of your daughters to be married to doctors. The game has seen its fair share of haters, due in part to the absolutely wildness of that theme, as well as the board design being an absolute mess to look at. But fans of the title love that it requires strategic movement when moving your pieces, and also rewards creative thinking and adapting to new situations as they happen. Oy Vey will be going up against the number 9 seed, Battle of the Sexes. This 1997 title divides players up into teams of men and women, and forces players to try to move up the board by answering questions that would be more well known by the opposite sex. Enemies of the title point out that the multiple pawns make the title drag on for way too long, the wild cards feature some absolutely broken ones that can end the game immediately, and that the theme of the game overall is not exactly the best idea. But the game's fans love the interesting twist on the standard trivia format, and that the difficulty of the questions for each team are offset by having the opposing team pick the questions that they need to answer. Moving on to our next battle, we have the number 5 seed of the Rock, Paper, Scissors game. This 2005 release tries to put a new spin on the classic rock, paper, scissors formula by adding a 3D element to the mix, and by also allowing multiple people to play at a time. Those that are not fans of the game would like to point out that this title does nothing to add to the rock, paper, scissors formula. In fact, the only thing that it does add to the classic game is a price tag that you need to pay. Fans of the game, however, do enjoy the included 3D console, as well as the fact that it opens up the classic rock, paper, scissors game to anyone that does not have fingers. It will be facing off against our number 12 seed, Pass Out. This drinking game from 1962 sees players try to move around the board and collect tokens by reciting tongue twisters, but with each wrong pronunciation of the twister, a drink is required. Detractors of the title were quick to point out that there is actually no penalty for screwing up the tongue twisters, as other than the drinking that you are intending to do by playing the game, screwing up the tongue twister too many times will end up with you gaining the token anyway, removing the one skill-based portion of the game that was included. They are also quick to point out that based on how long the game is, if you are playing with the wrong people, this game is extremely dangerous to your health. But fans of the game say that it accomplishes what it sets out to do very well, and that the simple gameplay loop requires little investment from the party setting. Up next in the bracket, we have the number 4 seed, Chutes and Ladders. This absolutely classic title sees kids try to make it all the way up to the top of the board at square 100 by spinning the spinner, along the way encountering ladders that can take them higher, or chutes that will move them backwards. This game's haters like to point out that there is nothing for anyone to do except for spin the spinner and then see what happens. And also will mention that a particularly unlucky group could end up playing this game for absolute ages. But due to the game's widespread success, this game also has a ton of fans that like to point out that it is easy to play for all ages, and that the unpredictable nature of the game means that anyone could take or lose the advantage at any time, creating massive amounts of tension. Let's check in on the Classic Game Watch Party to see how they feel about Chutes and Ladders making it in. And they are positively thrilled. We love to see that kind of energy here at the NBGA. Moving on, Chutes and Ladders will be going up against the number 13 seed, Killer Bunnies. Killer Bunnies in the Quest for the Magic Carrot is a 2002 card game that sees players attempting to acquire as many carrots as possible in the hopes that when the game is over, one of theirs will be the titular magic carrot that awards them the win. The game's haters have many complaints about the title, saying that any careful planning is useless due to the random win condition, that the game is tedious and basic without purchasing the expansions, and that the base game can slow to a crawl or stop completely due to the low bunny count in killer bunnies. But the game's fans say otherwise, saying that there's a deep strategy to playing your cards and interacting with the other players, the game moves very quickly as players get more familiar with the cards, and the social aspect forces you to work with other players while at the same time trying to beat them. With the top half filled out, let's move to the bottom half of the Stank region and meet the number 2 seed, Global Survival. This Monopoly-style title sees players move around the board and investing in countries from around the world, while attempting to bankrupt their opponents and become the last man standing. This game has seen widespread panning across the board due to how absurdly overcomplicated it is, the length of the game being completely inconceivable with the possibility of taking multiple hours for one board rotation, and for the fact that the game's economy is completely broken right at the very beginning. But fans of the game love how it fits into the extreme board game niche, coming loaded with geographical and country information from the time period and featuring every single country from 1992 as a space on the board. Global Survival will be facing off against the number 15 seed, Bean Boozled. This 2007 smash hit sees players compete in a last man standing event where they spin the spinner to learn what bean they must ingest and then eat it to see whether they get a good flavor or a bad flavor, being eliminated when they refuse to eat a bean or have to spit it out. Some of the haters will point to the nastiness of the beans as a negative, but some will focus more on the mechanics, seeing that if players are too prideful to give up, then the game will drag on forever, as well as the game coming with a finite amount of beans which will force you to buy more when they run out. However, fans of the game are numerous, seeing that the reactions to the beans' bad flavors are very funny, and the roulette-style gameplay keeps the stakes high throughout the game. Our next game in is the number 7 seed, Top Trumps. This title, first introduced in 1968, comes with cards that feature numerical values for different attributes. Players make their way through the game by drawing a card, calling out one of the numbers, and then seeing which of the card's numbers is the highest of that attribute. The winner will then collect all the cards, and the next round will begin. Critics of the game point to its similarities to War, being that there are no gameplay elements other than calling out a category and seeing whose number is higher on the card you draw. This repetitive gameplay can turn dull fast and even suffer from War game stall syndrome if cards keep getting traded with no real advantage being given away. But fans of the title mention that it rewards an understanding of the deck and category types and can be used as a great game for teaching kids differences in numerical values. It will be competing for its spot against the number 10 seed, Capital Punishment. This 1981 pro death penalty game forces players to try and get their criminals into death row the fastest, all while utilizing their own liberal pieces to try and get other players' criminals back out free on the streets. The game was hugely controversial on release due to its demonizing and oversimplification of the justice system, all while featuring some genuinely not so great elements within the cards and the board. However, fans of the game point out that this game is actually really fun to play, and rewards strategic movement of your pieces and making tough choices in a risk-reward type scenario. Our next competitor to be revealed is the number 3 seed, Super Deck. This 1994 collectible card game sees players select a hero and a villain to fight against another player's hero and villain card, all while trying to strengthen their characters with the supplemental cards that they can equip to their champions. While the game sounds complex, haters of the title will be quick to point out that the game actually features no complex mechanics at all, as the card's only function will be either to make your character's numbers bigger or make your opponent's numbers smaller. And since there are no complex mechanics to the game, it practically plays itself based on who has the better luck when drawing their opening cards. Fans of the title love the game for its great artwork and theming being able to immerse you in a superhero world, as well as the fact of it being a collectible card game allowing you to customize your deck with your own favorite cards. Super Deck will be competing in the opening round against the number 14 seed, Gay Monopoly. This fan-favorite title from 1983 saw players move around the Monopoly-inspired board of gay districts from around the United States, while trying to bankrupt their opponents and engaging in some of the unique mechanics added by the title, before it was ultimately sued out of existence by Parker Brothers, the makers of Real Monopoly. Detractors of the title will be quick to point out that it claims to support the gay lifestyle while also being neck-deep in gay stereotypes, as well as pointing out that the always hanky code questions are practically impossible to answer correctly if you haven't played the game before. However, the fans of the title love that it is both well-designed both artistically and mechanically, and that it shakes up the classic Monopoly formula with trivia and challenge elements that successfully lessen the Monopoly endgame syndrome. Up next in our bracket, we have the number 6 seed of 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. This 2006 title sees players compete to be the first one to have a fun trip around the world, stopping at popular tourist destinations along the way to learn about areas in that location. Those not fans of the title point to the dull gameplay as one of its biggest negatives, as all you do is roll dice and try to move around the board quickly, and that the game can even stall if a location comes to the top of the deck that nobody wants and nobody draws it. However, the title's fans love the game's great photography and the simple gameplay that makes it easy to play and understand, and also the fact that it could be used to teach geography to younger players. It will be going up against the number 11 seed, the Vanilla Ice electronic rap game. This 1991 Vanilla Ice tie-in sees players attempt to complete rap lines on the game board, before rapping those sick beats right out to your friends with the help of the electronic beatbox mic included with the game. Enemies of the Vanilla Ice electronic rap game would like to point out that the Mad Lib style raps are absolutely complete nonsense, and that the game has little replayability since most of the raps are about close to being the same. But those that love the title will point out that the absurdity of the concept makes spitting out these raps hilarious for all the other players, and that the game is pretty easy to set up and has a low amount of commitment for how much fun it provides the group. And with that, we've seen every game that will be competing in the Stank region. Let's take a look at the matchups and see which ones stick out. In the top half of this region, it seems pretty evenly matched, but we will be definitely keeping an eye out for whichever one of the 8 or 9 seed that moves on going up against one-upmanship. That should be an absolutely phenomenal matchup. But when looking at the bottom half of this region, we are seeing a ton of upset potential. A large amount of highly ranked heavy hitters are going to be taking the stage here. Capital Punishment, Gay Monopoly, and the Vanilla Ice electronic rap game all have a really good chance of taking the second round spot from these single-seeded teams. So you're going to want to keep your eye out on this division when filling out your brackets. With the Stank region complete, we've now determined half of the games that will be competing in the tournament, but dozens of games are still glued to their screens in the hope that their name will be called out and give them a shot at greatness. Will these games have their hopes crushed and their chance to make it in dashed? We'll meet the teams of the Stunk region right after we return after this. This NBGA broadcast is brought to you from the loving patrons over at the deli. Our supplier, Flage, our staff, Max Leon Thomas, Floris Leffler, and Benny Rush, our chef, Matthew Connorth, and our investors, Ice92355 and Campbell Graves. Truly the greatest ride ever. The NBGA would also like to thank Cam Krim Productions and viewers like you. Thank you. Welcome back! Last we left off, we had just rounded out half of the teams that will be participating in the tournament. But now let's head down to the Stunk region to see who has made it in down there. Our first competitor from this region will be the number 1 seed, WWB. The 2011 title, World's Worst Board Game, sees players attempt to go from the start to the finish, passing through 100 cards along the way in a 1v1 match. Players do this by rolling 1 die, and if they manage to roll a 5, they can move ahead 1 space, but then must roll another 5 immediately after, or they will be returned to the starting space. This loop continues until one player has reached the finish. Enemies of this title are quick to point out that this is hardly even a game, more so accurately a rolling the dice simulator until one player gets lucky with unimaginable odds and manages to win. In fact, an actual computer simulation determined that it would likely take more than 28 billion turns to just reach space number 13, and then immediately after the simulation crashed. but fans of the game love it for having set out to be awful and passed with flying colors, and also being a great way to torture exactly one friend for all eternity. WWB will be going up against the number 16 seed, Quelf. Quelf is a 2005 title that sees players move around the board while drawing cards that force them to do random and incredibly silly things the entire time. The game's haters will focus on the random elements and the penalties, making the game difficult to finish. And also, if the game's humor does not land, then it doesn't really have anything else to offer. But fans of the game see it as an extremely fun party game that forces your friends into hilarious scenarios, with there being such a large variety of those scenarios that it always keeps the gameplay fresh. Next up in the Stunk region, we have the number 8 seed, The Game of Life. The classic wheel-spinning title sees players attempt to go around their life while collecting the most amount of money as possible, hoping to have the highest total when their life is over. This game has garnered a ton of hate in the last few years, based on the fact that it offers hardly any gameplay other than spinning the wheel, and because of the salary system, the game can be decided in the first couple of turns, or if playing with the Millionaire Tycoon option, at the very end completely at random. But with a game this popular, it is bound to have a ton of fans who love the game's ease of setup and low commitment, making it an excellent party game, as well as, based on the version you're playing, having a couple of different key decisions that could give you an edge over your opponents. Let's see how the Game of Life is feeling about his spot in the tournament. Looks like he's celebrating already. I can't wait to see what he has in store for us once the tournament starts. Life will be going up against the number 9 seed, What Do You Mean? This 2016 title forces players to compete to see who can make the funniest meme, earning points if their internet funny haha pictures can outperform their opponents. The biggest complaint about this title is that it is just genuinely unfunny, and that it's a less polished version of Cards Against Humanity with a lot less variety in what your answers can actually be. But fans of the game see it as a harmless comedy game that can be played by those out of touch with the internet. It even features a little bit of strategy to the cards you play as you attempt to key in on the judge's sense of humor. Up next, we meet the number 5 seed of this region, Fat Chance. This 1978 title sees players attempt to move their fat man pawns around the board while collecting as few pounds as possible. Players can then compete in weigh-ins against their opponents to see who has gained the fewest amount of weight and earn points based on the difference. The opposition to Fat Chance will point out that the pellets are distributed way too slowly to keep the game moving, as well as weighing too little to actually make a change on the scale, making it practically useless. But the game's fans love the new mechanics that are unique to the title, and how the game rewards a good memory by keeping an eye on how many pounds your opponents have gained to know who to challenge. It will be going up against the number 12 seed, Speak Out. This 2016 smash hit forces players to attempt to pronounce different phrases while wearing a mouthpiece that does not allow them to shut their mouth correctly. Points are awarded to players when they are able to correctly guess what their teammate is trying to say. Those against this title will say that the game physically hurts to play and is pretty nasty to watch, while also featuring a gimmick that wears thin quickly and with mouth guards that need to be cleaned multiple times if playing in larger groups. However, fans of the title mention that it is genuinely funny to watch your friends struggle to pronounce these phrases, and that the small playtime and low commitment can help prevent the gimmick from getting stale. Our next competitor is the number 4 seed, Phase 10. This 1982 card game sees players try to compete to become the first to finish all 10 phases, with each phase requiring a different group of cards to collect in order to win that round. Those against the game mention how unjustifiably long it takes to play for how simple the gameplay is, as well as the scoring system being completely redundant due to the game being extremely prone to runaways. But fans of the game love how easy it is to pick up and play, with simple to learn rules that make it perfect for a low commitment large gathering. It will be going up against the number 13 seed of the Pumpkin King. This 2005 Halloween-themed title sees players race through the cemetery in attempts to become the titular Pumpkin King, while avoiding the cat that will send them back to the start if it catches them. Enemies of this title mention that the only actions that you can take in the game are rolling your dice and moving your pieces, with the I space on the dice being too prevalent so that you will be getting sent back to the start constantly by other players, making the game drag if one player isn't lucky enough to get through the resets. But fans of the game are adamant about how beautiful the custom molded pieces are, how easy the game is to play with its simple rules, and how the board being entirely customizable makes no two playthroughs the same. Now let's move down to the bottom half of the Stunk region and meet our number 2 seed, the Ungame. Released in 1973, the Ungame attempts to make its players better at communicating more effectively by allowing them to share thoughts, ideas, and feelings and making people tell it like it is. The game prides itself on featuring no competition, allowing everyone to be a winner so long as they learn a little bit about themselves in the process. Some people absolutely despise this title, seeing that it is more therapy than an actual game, featuring pretty much nothing to do other than answer a question and then move on to the next turn, and that it can produce awkward situations by forcing conversations from the cards. But fans of the game would be quick to point out that it really isn't even a game. It helps people to learn communicate better, and answers can be at the level that the person is most comfortable with, preventing that awkwardness. It will be going up against the number 15 seed, Mall Madness. This 1988 title, made to be played pretty much anywhere, features the gameplay loop of trying to spend all of your $200 by shopping at various locations around the mall. Players can move around the wall using the 2 spinners, but can also end up gaining money if they're unlucky. Haters of the title see these spinners as a negative, as you have no control over your piece or money and they're all dependent on the spinner. The game can even be a struggle to end because needing to spend exactly $200 can be quite difficult if your spinners don't line up. But fans of the game love that it is simple to play and easy to move, just like it was designed to be, even having a little bit of strategy to it thanks to the inclusion of the arcade and escalator spaces. Our next competitor will be the number 7 seed of Ludi Ludo. Ludi Ludo is an extremely old game where players compete to try to get their 4 pieces born and into heaven before their opponents are able to do so. The game's detractors point out that rolling dice is really the only thing you do in the game. It involves no specialty spaces or any other type of gameplay element, making it extremely dull if you don't manage to get the game over fast. But those that defend the title mention that there is a small amount of strategy in the order in which you want to move your pieces, and that the title is a great option for young children to try out as one of their first games. It will be going up against the number 10 seed of Pass the Pigs. This 1977 game has you rolling 2 small pigs around as dice, with you either gaining or losing points based on the positions that the pigs land in. It is a press your luck title that rewards players for going for the higher scores, but also punishes them for being too greedy with their rolls. Those that do not enjoy the game mention that the only action that you have in the game is to roll the pigs, and then decide whether you want to roll the pigs again. In the meantime, there is absolutely nothing for another player to do while one player is busy rolling their pigs. But those that enjoy playing do love the risk-reward mechanic, as it keeps the energy of the game going high for groups and makes the rolls more daunting as the points continue to climb. Moving to our next matchup, we will find the number 3 seed, Candyland. One of the absolute classic board games, Candyland sees players attempt to adventure through the titular Candy Land and attempt to be the first player to make it to the Candy Castle by drawing cards. The numerous amount of haters of Candyland will point to the fact that this is not even a game you play, it is just an event that you experience. All you do is draw a card and move your piece to the spot on that card, with the game also being completely unbalanced due to the specialty cards that throw you around at random. But the equally as numerous fans of the game see this as a perfect gateway game for young children. The simple rules and gameplay means that literally anybody can play the game, and it could get tense near the end due to the unbalanced nature of those cards. Let's check in again at the Classic Game Watch Party to see how they feel about Candyland making the cut. And they are just as excited as ever. Truly a great group sitting there on that couch. But moving on, Candyland will be competing against the number 14 seed, Trouble. Another classic title, Trouble sees players utilize the Pop-O-Matic technology to move their pieces around the board, while also attempting to impede other players by sending them back to the start. Enemies of the title hate how all you do in the game is tap the dome and see what happens, with the little strategy and luck-reliant gameplay not helping the game in that regard. But fans of the game love how easy the game is to understand and play, and mention that there is more strategy to selecting the piece's movement than there originally seems. And for our last matchup in the Stunk region, we have the number 6 seed, Dose. This 2018 sequel to Uno sees players attempt to get rid of all the cards in their hand by utilizing different mechanics that separates it from the original card game. Although the haters of this title mention that they've managed to take Uno and make it worse. The removal of most of the power cards limits your options of play, and not being able to match colors anymore skews the balance of the game to the lower numbers. But those that like Dose love that the rule changes give the game a unique feel to the original. And the score-based win condition fixes the issue of the original game possibly running forever. Dose will be matched up against the number 11 seed, Seen It. Seen It sees players compete in a trivia competition that is aided by the DVD element included with the board game. Those that do not enjoy the title point to its low accessibility of needing a DVD player to play, the low replayability for a trivia game, and the low strategy of just rolling the dice and answering a question before going to the next turn. But those that like Seen It enjoy the DVD implementation as a great way to experiment with the board game formula, and see it as a great game that fills the niche towards movie buffs. Now that the Stunk region games have been revealed, let's take a look at some of the key matchups that are already projected to impress. We are projecting a clash of titans from the matchup between the Game of Life and What Do You Mean? Both of these titles feature vehement hater bases that are going to do everything in their power to see their game move on, so them meeting in the very first round is going to be a battle to be remembered. Other than that, the Stunk region is pretty balanced in its matchups, while we are predicting a slight possibility of Speak Out coming over Fat Chance due to the amount of popularity that game has received. This region should be a really good one. But with its completion, we now only have 16 spots left in the tournament, and there are still tons of games everywhere hoping that their name will be called out next. Who will make it in and who will be left at home? Find out with the reveal of the Stonk region when we return. Welcome back. It's time to meet the final 16 games that will be competing for a shot at the title in the Stonk region. Heading over there now, let's meet the number 1 seed of the final region, Adultery. This 1969 title sees players attempt to spend a good time with 2 different players of the opposite sex, by having them spin the spinner to add to their time clock before the second half of the game gets started. Those that do not enjoy the title drag on both of the game's 2 halves, with the first half of gameplay being just spinning the spinner and gaining tokens, and the second half of the gameplay being actual literal adultery. In addition to that, besides the 2 players actively playing in the second half, the other players do nothing until it is their turn. Adultery will be going up against the number 16 seed, Anima. This 2006 high fantasy card game sees players attempt to build up their characters while battling beasts with their party members, eventually making their way up to battling an ancient threat at the end of the game. Those against Anima say that the game's randomness can often lead to unbalanced encounters that the party can't overcome, and if not played with the expansions, then the enemy content can run dry by the game's end. But those that enjoy the title love the abundance of character content, and mention that the fantastic combat system makes the game a joy to work through. Up next in the bracket, we find the number 8 seed, Tic-Tac-Toe. This positively ancient game is a 1v1 match where players attempt to either match 3 X's or 3 O's 3 in a row. Tic-Tac-Toe is the absolute lowest rated game on Board Game Geek, due in part to how extremely basic the game is, how the game structure leads to most matches ending in a draw, and once the game has been figured out, there's really nowhere to go. But the game is also enjoyed worldwide, seeing as the ease of rules and play means it can be taught and enjoyed to practically anyone, the low time commitment and ease of setup make it extremely accessible, and with learning the strategies behind the game being very rewarding, especially for children. Tic-Tac-Toe will be going up against the number 9 seed, Makin' Bacon. This 2012 title sees players press their luck to try and spell out bacon or roll combinations of the letters to earn points. Haters of this title will point out that it is pretty much just Yahtzee except with even less control over the scoring, and do not enjoy the fact that the only game feature is rolling the dice and deciding whether you want to roll the dice again. However, the game's fans love that the scoring system adds a risk-reward scenario to the rules, and that the quick pace of the game keeps it moving with little downtime. Our next matchup will feature the return of the number 5 seed, Mr. Bacon's Big Adventure. This 2009 title will see players in a mad dash through Meatland, as they compete to be the first one to get to the frying pan while avoiding obstacles like the disgusting vegan alley. Those against the title will point out its similarities to Candyland, but with a spinner mechanic that could make the game take even longer. This is in addition to the cards being hopelessly unbalanced, and that the Meat Feast alternative game mode is a genuine health risk to anyone that plays it. But those that enjoy the meat madness love how the cards add an element of randomness that keep players invested, and that they can also give an element of skill and decision making to the movements that gives players that think ahead an advantage. Let's check in with Mr. Bacon to see how he feels about making the tournament. Absolutely ecstatic. He's ready to compete for that title, and I think we're all ready to see what Mr. Bacon has in store for us. But to move forward, he will first need to overcome the number 12 seed of Triominoes. This 1965 spin on dominoes sees players compete to get rid of their 3-sided tiles, needing to match the numbers on each side in order to place it down. The game's haters point to this just being a more flawed version of dominoes, and that some of the game's design flaws can actually softlock some players into drawing forever, since none of the remaining tiles in the game can match anymore. But the game's fans see it as a more challenging version of dominoes, with the additional bonus system granting players more ways to gain points quickly. In our next battle, we'll meet the number 4 seed of Miss Monopoly. This 2019 Monopoly spin-off touts itself as the first game where women make more than men, and achieves this through the central mechanic of female players earning more money from go and starting the game off with more money than any male players. The game's detractors tout the wage gap as one of the worst board game mechanics ever invented, in addition to there being less decision-making factors due to the removal of the house system, and that the game somehow worsens the Monopoly in-game syndrome due to the lower property values. But those in favor of the title love how it simplifies the Monopoly gameplay for younger players, as well as acting as a great way to educate people on female-made inventions. It will be going up against the number 13 seed of Smoker's Wild. This 1978 anti-smoking title sees players try to gain as much money as possible while avoiding becoming addicted to cigarettes. Players will continue to die off from their addiction as the game continues until only one player is left standing. The game's haters will mention that every game will eventually come down to luck, based on either the cards you draw or the die that you roll. And if the game's jokes ever lose their luster, the game can become stale pretty quick. But those that enjoy the title love how the career cards push players to try to get each other addicted to smoking, and that the puns present in the game are absolutely atrocious, which gets a big thumbs up. Moving on to the bottom half of the Stonk region, only 8 spots remain for games to make it in, and we'll meet our first one with the number 2 seed of the region, the Oregon Trail card game. This 2016 card game aims to recreate the feel of the classic computer game, seeing your party try to make it all the way to Oregon without dying along the way. Those against the title mention that the game barely even works at all, having a ton of ruling holes where parts of the game cannot resolve, and some cards being so poorly worded that players have to make up effects for them in order for the game to continue. In addition to that, the game's balance is completely ruined by the insta-kill cards that cannot be foreseen or prevented in any way, leaving that player with nothing to do other than watch the other players continue the game without them. But those that enjoy the game love its build-as-you-play structure that keeps any two games from being the same. And in addition, despite the card game's many flaws, it still manages to capture the spirit of the original game very well. It will be going up against the number 15 seed, The Mask 3D board game. This 1994 tie-in board game sees you attempt to maneuver your Jim Carrey around to find all of his missing belongings that were lost during his time as the Mask. Those against the title say that the movement and piece collection is all based on luck unless you have the mask, and if you do manage to get the mask, it is completely broken, and will likely end the game in a few turns unless another player is able to take it from you. But the game's fans see it as an extremely well-constructed 3D game that not only looks great, but has fast-paced, intense gameplay since the games are so short. Our next matchup will be featuring the number 7 seed of What Shall I Be?, the exciting game of career girls. This 1966 title sees girls attempt to grow up to become one of the 6 careers that they can look forward to in their future. Those options being a teacher, airline hostess, actress, nurse, model, or ballet dancer. Those against the title will like to key in on the small and extremely shallow list of careers available for the women, and that rolling the dice and seeing if you got the right card is all you do in the game. But the game's fans mention it as a very simple game to play for a young audience, as well as the absurd theming and elements making the game completely unintentionally hilarious. These career girls will be going up against the number 10 seed of the original Trivial Pursuit. This 1981 classic sees players attempt to move around the board and answer trivia questions with their team, collecting pieces of the pie before attempting to land in the middle and answer one final question to become the winner. The detractors of the original version mention that the game is extremely frustrating to play if you cannot get the dice to move the right way to land on the last piece you need, as well as every single bit of the center mechanic completely ruining the game's finale. But those that enjoy the game love it as a great party option, especially since you can divide into larger groups of teams to share your knowledge, and with the game evening the playing field with a very diverse set of questions. Moving on to our next matchup, we'll meet the number 3 seed of Deutschlandries. This 1935 German classic sees players attempt to move all throughout the country and visit all of the destinations they were assigned. The first player to reach all of their destinations will win the game. Those against the title say that it can become extremely boring due to only rolling dice the entire time, with the game pretty much always being decided by either whoever rolls the highest numbers faster or who gets the closest together destinations off the opening card draw. But fans of the title see it as a great way to learn about Germany and its geography, with a couple alternate rule sets to add some flavor to the gameplay. Germany will be competing against the number 14 seed, Cheater. This 1995 Rummy-style card game sees players attempt to collect groups of cards while one player is awarded the powers of the Cheater, determined by a dice roll giving them a special advantage over the other players, but one that can also be lost at any time. Those against the title say that the cheater mechanic is completely luck-based, as well as the cards you manage to get, with the game being too long for the style of game that it is, and also making some cards completely pointless if you're playing a 2-player option. But fans of Cheater love how it rewards memorization and adaptability due to the ever-shifting game state, and that the cheater is never too broken due to the action cards balancing out his abilities. With that, we've come down to our last 2 games, and in this matchup we will be seeing the number 6 seed, Group Therapy. Group Therapy is the 1969 classic that encourages players to work out their problems as they move around the board, doing so by engaging in challenging questions or actions. The game's haters despise that it encourages the everyone's a winner style of play, as well as some of the questions having weird demands or creating awkward moments, and that the fact that the voting-based movement system is ripe for abuse from competitive players. But those that enjoy the title see it as a great way to get to know your friends better, and that the game has the option to be taken as seriously as the group wants it to be. Let's see how Group Therapy feels about its end-of-the-line inclusion. Ooh, and it looks like he is ready to go all in for the event. Group Therapy is not one to let this chance go to waste, and will be giving it his all no matter who stands in his way. But before he can do that, he will need to get past the last team included in the tournament, the number 11 seed, Bunko. Bunko sees players attempting to score the most points through 6 rounds. They do this by rolling the dice and recording their scores based on what they rolled. The game's haters are not fans of the fact that players have no control over the outcome of a game, as all you do is roll your dice and then record the score, before moving on to the next player. That combined with the broken scoring system makes the game nothing but luck reliance. But the game's fans love how the game's simple gameplay loop makes it easy to get into, as well as that broken scoring system meaning that anyone can come back from a bad rolling streak at any time. Let's see how Bunko feels about him being the very last game in. And I am seeing a wave of relief. Glad that Bunko can celebrate at this time. A lot of work lies ahead for him, but right now Bunko can celebrate his success. And with that, we now know all 64 games that will be competing in the worst board game of all time tournament. Now that we know who's in, let's take a look at the games that just barely missed the mark, with our 4 near misses. One that I'm sure a lot of people were expecting to make a splash, we have Monopoly. This big name title was left out of the bracket after NBGA officials decided that there are worse official and unofficial versions of Monopoly already present in the bracket. So seeing that it couldn't stack up to its other titles, it was denied a selection spot. A more niche title that was left out was Veilfisk's own torture game. This overcomplex and completely heinous title from the popular game developer did not earn a selection spot due to the game not meeting the qualifications to be eligible, as the game has never been released to the public. An unfortunate disqualification for a game that was sure to make a splash. Another online option that was left out was Insane Monopoly Pyramid Scheme. This title has garnered a lot of attention for being absurdly overcomplicated, but was ultimately denied a selection due to NBGA officials deeming that the game's mechanics all worked perfectly fine, and the fact of it being a digital-only release removes a lot of the frustration of trying to utilize all those mechanics analog. And finally, the last near miss, we have Fatal, a widely controversial title featuring some of the most disgusting mechanics ever put to the gaming sphere. It was ultimately determined by the NBGA officials that it is technically not a board game, as it is much closer in mechanics and gameplay to pen and paper RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons. A tragic disqualification for a game that was certain to have a deep run into the tournament. Let's check in on some of the other hopefuls that were just a little too good to make it in as well. And the jubilee that was felt at the Classic Games watch party has turned to sadness as Connect 4 has failed to qualify for the tournament. It will have to be content of watching its friends compete from home, as unfortunately it will not be able to compete alongside them. And here we're also seeing Money Card, the American Express travel game contemplating where it all went wrong. I can assure you that that is not a celebratory Angry Orchard. And here we're also seeing the tragedy of Secret Hitler. It has to be absolutely crushed, as it is one of the few fan-nominated games that didn't make it into the final bracket. All of these titles and many more will have to sit and watch from home to see which of the games will be able to accomplish what they were unable to. Quite unfortunate for them, but for the rest of the games and for you, it's time to get started. The brackets are now open to be filled out, and will remain open for this 1-week period. Once March 14th is over, no more brackets will be accepted, because on March 15th, the tournament will officially begin. Each day, one region's matchups will be posted to the community tab of this channel, starting with the Stink region. It's up to you guys to vote for which game you think is worse, and once the votes have been tallied and the winners decided, an update video will be posted to showcase the new matchups before the next round begins. Once the champion has been determined, the winning bracket will be announced, and their owner will become the recipient of the grand prize, a 1973 vintage version of Pit. This is the same copy of Pit used to create all of the visuals for the Pit video, and will come with its own certificate of authenticity signed by me so that you know it is the real deal. The game comes with all the necessary components, including the most important one, the iconic orange bell. A reminder that brackets are free to fill out and submit, so don't let anything get in the way of you becoming the new owner of this classic title. And with that, it's time to let the games rest and get ready for the big event. Remember to get those brackets in by the 14th, and to share this with your friends so that they also have a chance to grab that prize for your group. We also recommend that you subscribe so that you can be updated first about tournament news, important information, and other vital features. Signing off for the National Board Game Association, I am Cam Sandwich. Thank you for watching, and have a fantastic day.